Vikings, let's win this game.
Vikings fans, buckle up. There's real buzz right now over whether Minnesota should keep a key piece of this defense or shake things up. Would the Vikings actually think about bringing in an all-pro corner with 20 interceptions and a $48 million price tag? The draft keeps opening up wildly different paths, and on top of that, the Vikings also met with a 2,000-yard running back who could say a lot about the future of this offense. And trust me, where this is headed gets even more interesting. There's a kind of draft rumor that makes me nervous the second it starts sounding cleaner on paper than it would on the field. Minnesota walked into this window surrounded by talk about cap space, rotation, and the future, and a lot of people have already started treating the possible exit of a key piece on defense like it's some easy equation. It isn't. And when that kind of talk gets louder this close to the draft, I always get skeptical. Because a mid-round pick does not walk onto the field on Sunday and fix your pass rush. That's where this gets real. The name at the center of all this is Jonathan Greenard. The conversation picked up steam because there's a real market view that if some teams miss on edge rushers in the draft, they could circle back and see him as a ready-made answer. The money side matters too, because moving him would open up meaningful cap room for the Vikings, while Dallas Turner keeps developing and Andrew Van Ginkel is still a huge part of this defense. But here's the part that really hits me. Greenard is not just some guy in this group, even if his sack numbers in 2025 did not jump off the page. A deeper read of his tape points to stronger production than a lot of people realize. And that gap between raw stats and real impact is usually what separates rush takes from serious football evaluation. That is where fans can get fooled if they only look at the surface. Alec Lewis leaned that way when he said he would not trade Greenard unless the offer was a first-round pick, and even he does not expect that to happen. And there's another point that matters a lot. Kevin O'Connell said at the end of March that he is planning for 2026 with Greenard on this roster, which tells you that at least publicly the idea is not to tear apart a defense that still wants to compete right now. Louis Riddick also took the cautious route when he warned that trading away premium players and assuming you can just replace them is not that simple. I like that view. A lot, actually. Let me be completely clear here, I understand the temptation to sell high. But moving a pass rusher who still makes opposing offenses uncomfortable feels like the kind of move that sounds smart in April and hurts in November. And trust me, this fan base in purple and gold knows exactly how that feels. If you were the GM in this spot, let me know in the comments if you would hold him, or at least listen to offers. Because the next story moves away from the defensive front and into a much trickier kind of gamble. Quick favor, subscribe to the channel and jump into the comments too. Your opinion really matters here. There's still a position group on this roster that doesn't exactly make you feel great long-term. The secondary is one of them. There are short deals, there are pieces who could be gone after the season. And there's that uneasy feeling that Minnesota may not have fully solved this the right way yet. That's why this next name grabs attention fast. Then the conversation gets louder because a familiar name shows up. A big name, a guy who has absolutely made plays in this league before. But old reputation by itself does not fix downfield coverage. The name that entered the discussion is Trevon Diggs. And I need to frame this the right way. There's no strong sign that anything is close or that there's real momentum connecting Diggs to the Vikings. So this is more of a possibility than anything close to a real developing move. The thinking around it is pretty simple. Minnesota's cornerback room still raises questions in the medium term, and when a former All-Pro becomes available or starts getting mentioned, it is natural for fans and analysts to throw the name on the table. But this is nowhere near a clean story. Diggs used to be an absolute ball hawk. When he was rolling, he changed games with interceptions and made quarterbacks hesitate. The problem is that time moved on, the production dipped, and he stopped looking like the kind of defender who could offset the risk with a huge play every week. That's where the dilemma lives. Are you buying the memory, or is there still real football left to bring back? That is a very different bet, and it does not stop there. In the same wave of roster movement, Minnesota has also been linked to Oregon tight end Kenyon Sadiq on a pre-draft visit. That gets my attention because it shows a very different front office angle. While a name like Diggs would represent a bounce-back gamble on defense, Sadiq points toward long-term planning on offense. TJ Hawkinson is not going to be there forever. Josh Oliver has a very specific role, and looking for a versatile tight end starts to make a lot of sense if this team is already thinking 2 steps ahead. That part matters more than people think. To me, the most interesting part of this story is the contrast. On one side, you have a known player trying to prove he still has something left. On the other, you have a prospect viewed as a versatile weapon with a high ceiling, and that says a lot about where the Vikings are right now. This team wants to compete now, but it is also trying not to get trapped in the present. You are not getting this kind of fan-level read everywhere, because here we're weighing what changes Sunday and what can reshape this team for years. Let me be completely clear here. I would be way more curious about Kenyon Sadiq than excited about Trevon Diggs. If Diggs came in cheap and without any savior expectations, fine. But if the conversation is about imagining the old version of him, I think that is a reach. And from there, this whole thing jumps to an even bigger pressure point. The second a quarterback this big enters the conversation, everything changes. Some stories start as wild rumors and then suddenly turn into a real debate between fans, analysts, and people who live and breathe NFL football every day. This one is exactly that, because the second the idea shows up that Minnesota could make a massive move for an elite quarterback, nobody stays neutral. Some people immediately picture an unstoppable offense. Others see the price tag and almost get sick. And honestly, I get both sides. The name driving that entire wave is Joe Burrow. The logic behind the speculation is serious. Cincinnati still carries major questions about protection and defense, and if the season starts to go sideways again, the pressure around him could absolutely explode. Burrow has never publicly come off like a guy trying to force his way out, but the fact that this scenario even exists is enough to shake up any fan base that dreams big. That alone tells you how fragile this could get. And once you add in his history with Justin Jefferson at LSU, that's it. The whole conversation catches fire instantly. Now let's get grounded for a second. Bringing in Burrow would not just be a matter of wanting him. It would be a massive operation, huge contract, probably an outrageous package of picks, and then all the roster moves that would come with it. This is not a video game. You do not just hit a button and build a super team. Minnesota would have to decide how far it wants to go for a generational talent and how much of everything else it is willing to move around to open that door. That is the kind of move that changes the direction of a franchise for years, maybe for better, maybe not. And then you get to the most sensitive layer of this entire story. Justin Jefferson, because deep down, a lot of people are not looking at this rumor only through the Burrow lens. They are looking at it through the fear of wasting number 18's prime with instability at the most important position on offense. If this team has another bad quarterback season, the noise around Jefferson's future is going to rise fast. I am not saying he is going to ask out. I am saying serious franchises do not play around with that kind of risk. Anybody who lives and breathes Vikings football knows that. Let me be completely clear here. The part that hits me hardest is not even the dream of seeing Burrow in purple and gold. It is the warning hidden inside the story. If Minnesota does not solve the quarterback situation for real, sooner or later that bill is coming due across the whole building, and it will hit hard, because when a talented roster has no clear direction on offense, everybody starts running low on patience, even the stars. So tell me in the comments, would you pay the massive price for Joe Burrow, or would you go another way? At the end of the day, this story is not just about an insanely expensive quarterback. It is about ambition, nerve, and the fear of wasting precious time with one of the best players in football already on your roster. And if that already shakes up the fan base, the next story shifts from dream scenario talk to a pick that could reshape the board in real time. With the draft this close, the most interesting part is not just who could arrive, it is how the exact same Vikings pick can be read in completely different ways by major draft voices. And that says a lot about where this team is right now. Minnesota is heading into this final stretch with needs in more than one area of the roster. There is a direction, but the road is still wide open. And when that happens, every projection starts to feel like a reflection of the person making it. That is why this debate matters. On one side of the argument, you have Dylan Thieneman. On the other, there is Denzel Boston. And that's when the debate gets really good, because this is not just defense versus offense. This is roster identity. It is about whether the priority should be reinforcing the structure of the secondary, especially with all the uncertainty around Harrison Smith's future, or whether the offense needs to start preparing for more size on the outside and a stronger setup for its next phase. Those are two very different reads. Both make some sense, but they point to two different versions of the Vikings. If the path is Thieneman, I get it right away. Brian Flores asks a lot from his safeties. This is not a decorative position in his system. It is a role for players who rotate, close space, pressure, switch responsibilities, and read the play in a split second. So when a prospect shows up with versatility and ball production, a lot of people see a natural fit. And honestly, that kind of pick usually makes a lot of sense in Minnesota. Not because it is flashy, but because it matches how this defense wants to play every single Sunday. That is why it is easy to picture. Now, if the pick were Denzel Boston, the message would be different. It would mean the offense needs more physical presence on the outside and another piece who complements Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison with a different kind of impact. It is not the most talked about need, but it is not some wild fantasy either. If the roster has lost depth and still needs more consistency in the passing game, you can make a case for that path. especially if the staff sees real value in a bigger, stronger target who can help in scramble situations in this new offensive phase. Let me be completely clear here. I still lean more toward the defensive side. I think safety lines up more with the urgency and the identity of the Vikings right now. But I also do not treat the wide receiver idea like something absurd. What grabs me is this. If Minnesota goes offense in the first round, that means the staff believes it can win through volume and offensive pressure. That changes the shape of the team a lot. It is the kind of decision that reveals a franchise's thinking without anyone saying a word. And there's one more detail that makes this even more interesting. There is still an outside shot that Caleb Downs could slide farther than expected. If that happens, the whole board changes instantly. Vikings fans everywhere know how the draft works. One player falls, one pick shifts, and the entire week of conversation dies in 10 minutes. That is why this story is so good. It is not just about the player, it is about direction. And the next one, my friend, feels quieter on the surface but says a lot about what this team may already be planning behind the scenes. There are pre-draft moves that look small when they first come out, but make a lot more sense once you start connecting the dots. That is exactly the feeling I had here, because at first glance, this just looks like another ordinary visit. But once you think about Aaron Jones getting older, Jordan Mason's potential role right now, and the lack of guarantees going forward, the whole conversation gets bigger. Then it stops being a footnote. Then it becomes planning. The name this time is Seth McGowan. The Kentucky running back landed on the Vikings visit list, and that sends a pretty clear signal about how this franchise is looking at the future of the position. I am not talking about an immediate replacement. I am talking about planning ahead. Teams that want to stay strong do not wait for a room to empty out before they start thinking about restocking it. And Minnesota, by all appearances, is looking at that picture early. That's where this starts to matter more than people think. McGowan is not walking in with the kind of shine that dominates headlines by itself. And honestly, that may help keep the conversation more honest. He is built well, runs with patience, handles contact, and could be viewed as a physical option to add to a rotation. At the same time, there are concerns about explosion and ball security. So no, this is not the kind of name that walks into the building as a ready-made answer. This is a bet on a specific mold. And that kind of draft decision always splits a fan base. I know how that goes. What stands out to me most is how determined the Vikings seem to be in studying running backs. Once you see multiple names at the same position landing on the radar, you cannot just call it coincidence anymore. That tells you the work is real. The franchise is clearly examining the market to see whether it can find youth, strength, and cost control for the next few years. And that connects to something bigger. It is not enough to build a good offense for one season. You have to keep feeding that group all the time. Otherwise, the bill comes fast. Let me be completely clear here. I like it when a team plans before the problem explodes. Not every visit turns into a pick. Not every pick turns into an answer. But ignoring the future of this position would be a mistake. Aaron Jones deserves respect. Jordan Mason can help a lot. But the NFL does not wait for anyone to calmly organize the room. You blink, and the need has already become a real problem. That is why this topic carries more weight than a lot of people think, even without the star power of the others. And there is still one more layer that ties everything we talked about today together. While part of the conversation revolves around stars, huge trades, big names, and mock draft battles, this Seth McGowan visit reminds you of a simple truth. Strong franchises are built in quiet moves too. Sometimes the future does not come through the door making noise. Sometimes it shows up in a low-key visit, a well-done report, and a draft pick almost nobody celebrated on the day it happened. And that leaves this whole breakdown in exactly the right place to look at the full picture of where the Vikings are right now. At the end of the day, the picture right now is pretty clear. The Vikings are at a point where every decision affects both the present and the future at the same time. There is real debate about holding on to Jonathan Greenard. There is a big-name possibility floating around as a risky bet. There is a wild dream involving Joe Burrow. There is a draft that could reshape the identity of this team. And there is a quieter move like Seth McGowan that still says a lot. This is not a calm stretch. This is a franchise crossroads. I'm going to say it plainly. Minnesota is closer to defining its identity than a lot of people realize. And what comes out of these decisions could either lift this team for real or leave the fan base with that bitter feeling that a huge opportunity slipped away. Drop your take in the comments. What do you think about all of this? Stay tuned. SKOL Vikings. Let's go.